Welcome to the Metal Verbalizers podcast. There are a lot of hardworking musicians and great music in underground metal. We want to support this, so we started this podcast. We also want to share the great underground music with you listening. If you enjoy this podcast, your support is very important, because the more people who find us, the more we can support the bands that we verbalize. In this episode, I will introduce a band by talking about the band's sound, influences, lyrics, name, future plans, and more. I'm Johan Verbalizer, and this episode will be dedicated to the band Pnuk. Pnuk is a thrash metal band from Spain and was started in 2014. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what the proper pronunciation is, but I'll pronounce it as Pnuk, and I will explain why when talking about the name's origin. The members had already played in other bands in the area before starting Pnuk, but eventually met and started Pnuk. Up until 2018, the texts were written in Spanish, so the first two albums had songs with Spanish lyrics. But in 2019, Pnuk changed vocalist, which caused the band to start writing lyrics in English instead. I don't know the exact reason for that decision, but in 2022, Pnuk released the album Goat Civilization, which is basically a remake of the band's first two albums, but now with English lyrics instead of the Spanish lyrics like the first two albums had. When it comes to the main influences of Pnuk, the band is very influenced by old school thrash metal, such as the Big Four, Centrix, Slammer, Acid Rain, etc. This is the music the members of Pnuk used to listen to when they were growing up, and is the type of music they want to play. But each member has individual influences of different styles that affect the band's overall sound. Some members want to play really fast, while others want to play with more groove, etc. The band takes these ideas and basically puts them in a blender, and the result basically becomes Pnuk. I think that Pnuk has succeeded very well in creating that old school sounding thrash, but with also a kind of a modern touch to it. They play with pretty nice tempo. The music of Pnuk is not super fast, which gives it a very heavy sound. And I would compare this to bands like, Exodus and songs like Blacklist, for example. That kind of like, it has a pretty good tempo, but it kind of like, relatively speaking, it's kind of slowing down if you compare to how, really fast thrash metal can sound like, which usually gives it like this kind of very shugging, very heavy feel, which is something I think is really, really cool. Also, there's definitely groove in the sound of Pnuk, but I think they have a very good balance. It's not prominent enough for me to consider Pnuk like a groove thrash band or something like that. But on the other hand, if you like this type of like really groove type thrash, I believe that you will really appreciate the sound of Pnuk. If I'm gonna be completely honest, I'm personally not a huge fan of that type of groove thrash. It's not my favorite type of thrash metal, so to speak, but I really, really like the sound of Pnuk. So I think that the band have really succeeded in finding a very, very nice balance there. The songs tend to be relatively long, actually. If you look at the band's album After Death, for example, none of the songs are under 4.5 minutes, and several songs are over 6 minutes. But the band's first album has a few shorter songs that are like under 4 minutes, and even under 3 minutes. Pnuk wants to have a very old school thrash approach with their own personal touch, when it comes to the band's image. The band wanted a clear looking logo, but that also clearly represented the band's style. There should be no question that Pnuk is a thrash metal band, and not like a symphonic or power metal band or something like that. And I would probably think that I would say that they really succeeded in that. It's like when you see the logo of Pnuk, you don't exactly expect something like that, you know, like symphonic or power metal. So I would definitely say that they succeeded in that regard. And I think actually, I believe it was the name and to a large degree also the logo that actually caught my attention to Pnuk. And also I thought that the album artwork for the album After Death that I mentioned was also really, really cool with like, you know, the kind of POV style with like a hand sticking out of a grave. I thought that was really, really cool. And, you know, with the logo, that definitely made me want to listen to it. And that was basically how I got into the band. Another really important part of Pnuk is the band's live shows. Their approach is to perform a very direct show with as much attitude as possible. So with that description, I think that Pnuk sounds like a really, really cool band to experience live. So, maybe I don't even have to say it, but if you get the opportunity to see Pnuk live, I would definitely take it, because they seem really, really cool live. When it comes to the lyrical themes of Pnuk, the subjects are very diverse. It includes serious subjects such as war, injustice, and personal introspection. But the band is also writing about a little bit less serious subjects, such as the song Altered Beast from the album After Death, which is about the video game called Altered Beast. Pnuk feel like they've managed to find a very great balance between music and lyrics. And kind of speaking of Altered Beast a little bit, I actually believe that was the first song I heard by Pnuk. And it seems to me like Altered Beast is probably the most popular song by the band. So as I was kind of getting into a little bit before, like the style of Pnuk, and you know, like it's kind of like where you want to start with a band. Like I listened to Altered Beast. I think that was the first song I heard, and it is a very, very great song and a really, really cool song. So if you would start with the Altered Beast, I believe that would be a really, really great start to kind of hear what Pnuk has to present to you. The name Pnuk originates from an anecdote that started when a great friend of the band bought a shirt in a flea market with the text Pnuk. It is unknown what it's supposed to mean on that shirt. The band has always assumed and kind of speculated that it is probably meant to say punk, but it was like misspelled, which again kind of brings us back to the start of this episode when and like for the reason why I pronounce it as Pnuk, because it's probably supposed to be punk. So that's kind of like if you kind of try to pronounce it, like if you try to pronounce punk when it's like spelled like that, it's pretty much Pnuk, and that's why I pronounce it like that. But anyway, like their friend used to wear this shirt when going to parties, where you drink more alcohol than necessary, as the band describes it. Eventually, they started using Pnuk as a term for, quote, a state of alcoholic intoxication when you've been drinking too much, end of quote. So the term was used like, yeah, man, I have a serious hangover. Yesterday I was Pnuk, and look at me now. Something like that. This is what the band name Pnuk means, and this is why the band chose it as a name. And you know, the kind of whole thing about like, you know, beer and like being drunk and thrash metal, there's a certain connection there that I think is pretty nice. I think that I was pretty interested with like the meaning behind the name, because when I saw the name, I honestly had no idea what it meant. So like finding out what the name Pnuk actually came from and like where it actually originated from was really interesting to me. When it comes to the future of Pnuk, the band is currently hard at work with their upcoming album and are planning to release it early next year. The band is very excited for this album, not the least since this will be the first album featuring the band's newest member. So this album will be a little bit different since it will include new ideas from the new member. Pnuk is also discussing possible collaborations with other local bands in a few of the songs. Pnuk is also planning new merch and continuing to play live shows. So I believe that I should end this episode with a few words from Pnuk. Quote, "We are offering something new, drinking directly from the thrash tradition, but with some fresh ideas. Stay tuned to our late news because they're going to be amazing and you will like them." End of quote. These are my thoughts and comments about the band, but now I would like to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Pnuk? Do you have a favorite song by this band? If so, which one? Let us know in the YouTube comments or on social media. We have now reached the end of this episode. It means a lot to me that you've been listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate that. If you want to support us, great ways of doing so are subscribing on YouTube as well as following on Spotify, Facebook and Instagram. While you're on Spotify, feel free to also rate the podcast, as well as generally liking, commenting and sharing. All of this can be done very quickly, very easily and completely free. But it would really help the podcast and the bands we verbalize. We would be very thankful. We will be back to verbalize again next week.